Rupert Lowe, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I have to say I sort of read this report with interest. I find myself being confused by all the various sort of disparate funding streams, which obviously the majority of it goes through UKRI, but there are other sort of bits and pieces, and it all seems to be quite disjointed. I mean, the objective of my question here is to make sure that we understand that you're actually spending the right amount of money on infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And to that point, the NAO in their intended objectives in the session came up with this, which is UKRI does not have an overarching framework to monitoring and evaluating performance of research infrastructure. So and if we look at paragraph 3.6 on page 37, I did a bit of work on this because it seems to me that you rely quite heavily on the universities for infrastructure, reading this. And I did a bit of work on the universities, so if you're relying on the universities, I think potentially you've got a problem. Because when I looked at the universities, I find that many of them are actually now suffering very large deficits. You probably know that. So I think Cambridge 53 million, Coventry 60, Brunel 56, Essex 22, Derby 23, Cardiff 31. I'm also concerned that they seem to be spending hugely increased percentages on non-research related jobs. So they've been hiring and buying people or bringing in people to do things called Senior Continuous Improvement Managers, Associated Director of Belonging and Engagement, Events and Experiential Learning Officer, Immigration Compliance Associate. And what's happened is the research element versus the administrative element has dropped. Equally, we read here that there's a 5.6 billion required to restore university-owned research infrastructure to a fully operational condition. So do you actually think that you are, even though I think what you're doing is slightly smacks of central planning, which I never like, do you think you are actually investing your money wisely in the correct infrastructure, given that there appears to be a weak link with the universities? And are you chucking good money after bad?
So who are you addressing that to, Rupert, please?
Well, I think probably to Sirian and Emran.
There are many facets in that question. Can I start with how we distribute our money? And I sympathise actually with your viewpoint that it's quite hard to interrogate how the money gets spent. To that end, we, from the 1st of April, are completely changing our financial ledger system.
All right, you keep going.
Carry on. Completely changing our financial ledger system so that we previously had a large number of relatively small schemes. We are moving that through to aligning our ledgers with our mission so that you can see the connection from strategy to spending, right? So that it's really very overt. So the first bucket of money is around curiosity-driven research and discovery. The second bucket of money is aligning with societal priorities and government priorities, so predominantly the industrial strategy and how we deliver against that. And the third bucket of money is helping companies to start, to scale, and ultimately to stay in the UK and prosper in the UK. So our schemes are going to align with those three high-level missions that the organisation has been set by the government. So I hope that in future it is much clearer to see how our money aligns with those outcomes. So trying to drive spending to align to outcomes, which I think is the thesis of your question. Concerning our exposure with our partners, so of course UKRI, we self-perform research. We have about 6,000 researchers, which is sort of the scale of the University of Oxford or the University of Cambridge. And we have a large number of research infrastructures ourselves that we operate. But we also put the predominant amount of our funding, more than 80%, goes into universities. And we work in concerted partnership with them. So I don't think it's my job, and I don't think you want it to be my job, to micromanage how they achieve outcomes, to look at exactly their staffing mix and how they're setting up their employment contracts and who they're employing. I should be holding them to account against outcomes. So I should say very clearly, this is what I want you to achieve with that investment of public money, and then I hold them to account against their outcomes. How they achieve it is actually their business, I think. So.
But you are relying heavily on the universities, aren't
Absolutely.
you, for the infrastructure investment, unless I misunderstood it.
Totally correct, yes.
And when you don't have a fully integrated portfolio review, which I read you don't, I mean, how can you tell your money going into these universities isn't going to fund this administrative burden that they're taking on? I mean, obviously with Cambridge we read about the influence of China, funding streams coming from China, and obviously that sort of issue. If they're short of money, they become open to arguably more malign influences, such as funding from overseas countries who may not have the interests of the British people at the top of the agenda. So I think it's a valid question for the committee to ask. And I always think, Sir Ian, when you're dishing out large amounts of money, as we've known from history, it opens up the risk of fraud, of deceit, of all sorts of human weaknesses which basically go with pots of money being dished out. You only have to look at the money being transferred from northern Italy to southern Italy and other issues like that. So no, I think the committee wants to know that the taxpayers' money is being spent well and isn't just disappearing into a woke university sort of abstract experiment, which to me, when I had a quick look at this, it appeared it might be. So I thought you might be worried about that.
I'll pick up three things.
I wonder if I might just say a couple of broader things about university finances and then ask Ian to say more about how UKRI monitors its spend into universities. I think the first thing I'd say is just on some of the universities that you listed there, their balance sheets or some of those universities, their balance sheets are very strong. And so the deficits that they may have in any one year might be a deliberate decision because they're investing particularly hard in that particular year, but they're doing so on the basis of a balance sheet that means that that's a perfectly legitimate decision for the university to be making. And you know, we shouldn't be looking to control that, I think, because they're independent institutions. Equally, though, I think some of the universities you name, the deficits probably are worrying, and they may not have the balance sheet position that means they can run a deficit like that year after year. And so I think the second thing I'd say is that we are looking very hard at university financing and sustainability. Ministers made the decision as part of the spending review to protect and indeed continue to increase the proportion of research funding that goes to universities as a block grant, as it were, to ensure that there's that stable footing for universities. And tuition fees, after a long period for domestic students, after a long period of being flat, are going to increase again in line with inflation. I suppose the other thing that universities would say is that financial position is driving some different business decisions by them. And so we're seeing some key decisions about consolidation. Just in the last few weeks, King's College London and Cranfield University have announced that they're going to be merging some of their operations. We've seen other instances of that. Again, I don't think it's for us as a department to adjudicate on those. They're independent institutions. It's for them to make those decisions. But it feels like those decisions, especially that one, I think feels like a good way of protecting the research strengths of both of those universities.
Well, with merger comes dislocation, as you know. I don't need to tell you that. But I mean, this 5.6 billion, clearly there is an issue of underinvestment, which is affecting research, isn't it? I mean, is that not what you're saying, what the NAO is saying here in paragraph 3.6?
Do you mind if I come back on a few things there? To start with, I think we should remind ourselves that our universities are a huge national asset. The fact that we have 4 universities in the top 10 in the world is a massive asset for this country, and we should exploit it more. And it's not just a few. We have 17 in the top 100, so we have both depth and breadth. Your comment about our approach to portfolio management, can I pick up on that? So we really do oversee all of our infrastructure as a portfolio, be that physical infrastructure or digital infrastructure or maintenance of infrastructure. They are seen as a portfolio of investments, which is the right thing to do, and it allows us to change spend profiles on individual projects so that we can meet an overall spend profile. And we do that actively. We manage it actively as a portfolio. Your point about the condition of the estate, So the report rightly acknowledges...
I think it's a question.
Yeah, absolutely. So the report rightly acknowledges that to maintain the existing estate, we have a deficit. What it doesn't assess is whether we want to maintain that existing estate. So that is all the infrastructure that exists at the moment, but we should be constantly making active priority decisions and saying that investment that we made 20 years ago, do we want to maintain that piece of infrastructure, or do we want to now offboard it? And we should be constantly making those decisions, and that is not addressed in the report. It just says to maintain the existing portfolio. So the portfolio of things that we want to maintain is smaller than that number, and therefore we think is manageable within our settlements. And then lastly, you asked about China and fraud. Let me just address those two things. So when we make investments into universities, we have a very clear policy on what we call trusted research and innovation, which outlines the expectations of our investment and how that is protected and how it is used in the nation's interests, and the partners with which we can work on different subjects. So there's a very clear policy on that, upon which all of our investees, universities or centres or catapults or companies, all have to abide by that policy. And then lastly on fraud. So we take this very seriously. We are spending public money, and many of the endeavours and ventures that we're investing in are very early stage, and they are risky. They are risky ventures. Just to give you comfort, so for 24-25, last financial year, our fraud rate was 0.01%, so very low. And actually error was bigger than fraud. Even our error rate was 0.1%, most of which we recovered. So I think we do a very good job of managing fraud over a big portfolio.
You're obviously happy that you're directing your investment into infrastructure correctly on that basis?
Yes. We have an
Can I just
exceptional
come on
portfolio.
the back of this? The NAO in page 37, 3.6 say that the Office for Students estimates that 45% of providers, as university providers, are on course to operate with a deficit. Now, I hear what you say about there may be particular reasons why somebody's running at a deficit, but you also highlighted the Cranfield-King's merger, and I suspect that is likely to go on. There will be more consolidation in the university sector, particularly if news headlines are right that the number of students is dropping off, people choosing not to go to university is reducing.